for themselves. And if you walk through the story of the Bible, in the Old Testament, God creates Jerusalem, this place for his people to dwell. Within the midst of all of his nature, he actually raises up a place for people to be. And I should have a verse to point this out. People in the back? Yes? Isaiah? Hello? Yeah, that one. Be glad and rejoice forever in what I will create. I will create Jerusalem to be a delight and its people a joy. You also have to know that Isaiah, Jerusalem's not simply a place, it's also about a people. Because not only does God create this place as a place to be celebratory and wonderful, he creates his own people, Israel. And again, we've got another one in Isaiah for you all in the back screens there. God's creating the nation of Israel, these people that he wants to gather together and make into a certain type of nation to reflect himself to the world. Hello? Is that? Thank you. Appreciate it. In Isaiah again, but now this is what the Lord says. He who created you, O Jacob, he who formed you, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. Not only is God creating this place, especially, he's creating a people especially, summoned by name to be his. And he's active amongst the people of Israel because he really wants them to show everybody else what he's like. And that's the same thing, if you go back to Genesis, that's what the author's trying to do, is I want to show you all what my God is like. My God creates with the word. And when the writer writes that in Genesis, he's being faithful to who God has called him to be as part of Israel. That is, he is telling everybody who his God is and what his God is like. So God continues to create. And in the Old Testament, you see it as he draws people to himself and tries to make them special and make them holy. And then you see that there's this pattern. You can go ahead and pull that down for a sec. There's this pattern with Israel. It goes like this. God calls Israel and he says, come be mine, come be special, come enjoy my favor. And they say, woohoo, God, that sounds great. And then they say, oh, but we would really rather be selfish and do whatever the heck we want. Can we just do both? And so God's kind of like, yeah, not so much. But they try it anyway, and they're like, yay for being totally selfish and doing anything they feel like and looking just like every other nation and being cruel and heartless and everything else. And then they end up usually getting themselves in a whole mess of trouble. And they tend to get captured and taken away to be prisoners of other countries, which is generally no fun whatsoever. And as they're captured and as they're prisoners, then the people of Israel call out to God and they say, help us! You were supposed to be our God. We were supposed to be your people. Bail us out. Help, help, help. And God is faithful to them, and he brings along prophets and judges who are men and women that were brought by God to bring his word back to the people, to tell them what to do next, and to help bail them out of being captured. And this becomes a cycle, because as soon as they're bailed out and they're like, yay, God, then they're like, oh, but we also really want to be selfish. And on it goes. Of selfishness leads to capture, leads to being miserable, leads to God saving them. And yay, God, never mind, we'd rather be selfish. And off we go into capture again. And around the cycle goes. And in the midst of this cycle, as Israel is at a really low point, and they're sitting here captured again, wondering, is God doing anything to help us out? Is God creating at all? Then the prophet Isaiah comes up, and he writes to them, and he brings them a word from God. That is something that I think we should be listening to again today. If you have a Bible, let's go ahead and flip. We're in Isaiah 61. So you've got to remember now, Israel has gone through the cycle over and over and over again. They're back to being captured. They're back to being miserable and under somebody else's thumb. And just as they're wondering, is God doing anything about the situation we're in? The prophet comes in Isaiah 61 and he says, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. If you could leave up that slide for me. When the prophet comes, he's not just saying it's going to get better. He's saying God's going to be creating for you guys and in you guys. And what God is going to create is he will create beauty. And his raw materials are going to be ashes. God is going to create beauty from ashes. Now, I think about Genesis 1, and I kind of think that that is a lot like those artists who can paint on blank canvases. They can just imagine something, and up it goes. Nothing's really existing, and God just speaks and creates something out of nothing. Blank canvas, God speaks, and there's our world. Mountains and trees, rivers, oceans, all of it. But when the people of Israel mess up, I think God creates here, and it's a lot more like a photographer. He's taking pieces of what's around, and they're pretty ugly, painful pieces. And God uses those pieces and brings them together, and he's going to make something beautiful. So he's taking ashes, which are symbols of mourning and despair and everything painful, and he's going to create beauty for his people who he loves. He will give them oil of gladness to pour over themselves instead of mourning, and a garment of praise from a spirit of despair. I think what God's doing is a lot like a photographer. He's taking the pieces of the pain of his people, and he's weaving them together to make something new. And he is still creating for them because he loves them. Now we're going to fast forward a little bit more to when Jesus comes on the scene. Because God's people are now again under someone else's rule. When Jesus shows up, you may or may not know that the people of Israel, God's special chosen people who are supposed to have his favor, they're under Rome's rule. And Rome kind of sucks as far as governments go. They're really violent and really oppressive. And they kind of just like to beat people up and kill them for fun. Unless, it's one of the ways to just keep control. They're not a lot of fun. And it's not really a great peaceful place to live when you're living under Rome's rule. And so God's people are gathered together, and they think God's going to send us somebody, and that somebody is going to start a war, and we're going to fight, and we will drive the Romans out of our land, and the promise will be great. And that's who they're looking for. And then Jesus shows up as the one God sent, and the people of God are kind of in that same place they were with Isaiah here. And Jesus stands up in front of everybody in the middle of church on like one of his first Sundays going public, because he's baptized and then he's led to be tempted, and then this is like one of his first Sundays when he's like gone public and people know who he is. He stands up in church, he picks up a scroll, and he claims this passage and starts to read it to all of them. So now we're in Luke 4. Luke 4, if you want to turn there, it's coming on the screen in a sec. So you've got to remember now, same situation as Isaiah was in. The people are under oppression. They want to know what God's doing. And Jesus stands up in front of all of them,